thanks, Leah. Thanks a lot for having me, folks here. It looks like we got a small group. We got about 10 participants so far. 9 if we subtract JG. So I think we can probably keep a pretty conversational tone here. So if you all have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask it right quick. We'll try to make this more of a conversation. That lecture, dead excited to be here with y'all. The MLH Fellows Program is one of the things I'm most excited about to come out of this quarantine. And the fact that you all are here is something I regard as a very significant privilege. I've heard a lot about the really fantastic work that you guys have already done so early into the program. I hear you're getting pull requests merged and you're cutting a lot of code. I'm very, very impressed and obviously very excited to have such a geographic diversity with us on the call. I know for the folks in Africa in particular, this is really late into the day, so we're going to try to pack a lot of quality content, a lot of quality tools. They're going to help you not just over the course of your fellowship, but indeed over the course of your career. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So I'm Rob Spectre. I'm the CEO of ChildSafe AI. We're the artificial intelligence platform protecting kids online. And a little bit about my background. I'm a software developer and I've worked on the web for the past 15 years. So have had a lot of time banging my head against the wall of building web applications of all sorts of shapes and sizes. And through that experience, I've gotten exposed to a lot of tools that I think might be useful for you as you are continuing your journey for a developer. So today, what I thought we might talk about is something that may be useful for you as you're starting to integrate outside data sources to whatever project that you're working on. Really what we're going to be talking about are two things. One, web APIs, and the second are web hooks. So these two bits will become really readily apparent, but given that we're a few minutes in and I'm the only one talking, how about we pop a little question to the crowd. First question for the group, what is an API in a broad sense? Does anybody know? Feel free to unmute. Thank you, JG.
I guess the way that I would describe what an API is it kind of acts like your middleman to getting you what you want to access, I guess.
That's pretty close. That's pretty close, Christopher. It's definitely an interface. So it stands for Application Programming Interface. And before it seems like intimidating or really intense, one thing that you should bear in mind is basically the entire time that you're programming, you are using an API. So if you're building an Express app, or if you're building a React app, or if you're building a Django app, or if you're using any of these frameworks out there, or indeed if you're building a framework for someone else to consume, that is an application programming interface. It just happens to be inside your application as opposed to being external. Web APIs are a way to provide a very easy interface for folks that are outside of your firewall, for outside of your online service, to have access to something that they might be able to find useful programmatically without being prescriptive about what programming language they use or what protocol they use. So these web APIs are the same kinds of APIs that you would use inside your program, except they are abstracted to a web protocol, an HTTP protocol, that you can easily interact with any web client that you can import into your code. The inverse of that are web hooks. So web hooks are requests that an online service makes to your web application, pushing you information that you're looking for, as opposed to you polling or pulling that information into your app in the form of an API. And those are the two things that we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the push technology with APIs, you contacting an external service over HTTP. And then we're going to talk about webhooks, which are an online service pushing that information to a web application that you specify. And we're really going to be talking about tools that are going to make it very easy for you to integrate these kind of external APIs. Does that sound good to y'all? Yeah, Kenneth. Application Programming Interface. That is correct. All right. Let's assume that this is going to be a fun time. The number one problem with working with a web API, whenever I'm touching one for the first time, and I'm basically going to be touching one for the first time for our session this afternoon, is visibility, right? if you're working on a web app and something breaks, like a button isn't aligned in a correct way, or you click on something and it doesn't do anything, or you have an image that isn't cropped correctly, so it doesn't have the person's correct face in there. The biggest problem that you have in that circumstance is just identifying the code that is creating this visual mistake that you can see in your front-end application. With web APIs and webhooks, a lot of times what you're looking at is invisible, right? Because these are all HTTP requests that are happening in the background of your application. So just gaining visibility into the communication from your application and coming to your application can be a challenge. And so those are the tools that we're going to look at today. And the way I like to think about these tools is they basically make it so that you can go inside the actual wire, inside the actual internet, and see what's going on magically with these web APIs and with these webhooks. So with that framework in mind, why don't we go ahead and bring up my desktop, and we are going to take a look at an API for the first time, one that I haven't seen before. So this is the Twitch API. It has a RESTful web API, a thing that we can push to, and it also has webhooks, which is a thing that we can ping and bring in to our application. So we're going to take a look at Twitch and see if we can use a few tools in order to build a little Twitch integration right quick. Also going to bring over a terminal window so that we can play around with a few tools and get some of this visibility that I've been talking about. Okay, so first stop is we're going to go to the Twitch console, and we're going to do what any good developer should do before they try something out for the first time. We're going to go to the developer documentation, and we're just going to get a quick overview of what's going on. Okay, so it looks like we have a bunch of APIs here. I'm told we should be using the new Twitch API. Take a look at that. We got a little introduction here. Looks like from this documentation, in order to access the API, we need to set up a client ID, which suggests to me that we probably need to create a new Twitch application. And I would suspect that we can do that inside our Twitch console. In fact, I've already taken the liberty of creating one earlier today, but we're going to create another one called MLH Live Demo. Now, one of the things that we have to specify here is an OAuth redirect URL. So looking at the authentication structure, it looks like they're using OAuth to provide authentication. And the way that OAuth works is that the service provider, Twitch, lets you log in with your own credentials. But instead of sending my application your username and password, which would be very bad, they instead verify that it is you with your credentials on their own service, and then they give you a free pass, a little token, a little ticket that can give you access to whatever that user authorizes you to do. Now, Swift just hopped on. I could tell because he has some super hippie hair. Swift, how much fun is integrating OAuth for the first time whenever you're trying to use an API?
Oh, it's so much fun. I think it's the highlight of my experience integrating any API.
That was not the answer we were looking for. JG, would you like to try?
I would say, what is a living hell, Rob?
Ah, that ding, there we go. You just got the daily double, JG. That is 100% accurate. It's not very much fun. Basically, you have to set up a server. You have to make sure you have an SSL certificate. You have to do a whole bunch of work to do this like three-legged magical dance. Some of them involve like importing SSL keys or maybe exporting an SSH key. All of it is not very much fun at all. Fortunately, there's a service that will take care of all this for you so that you can quickly get a token fast without having to set up an application yourself. And this is the first tool that we're going to talk about today. This tool is called OAuth.io. It's totally free. If you sign up for an account, you get this little dashboard here, and you can see integrated APIs. And basically what this service does is it takes care of all the crazy setup just so that you can get your token and you can start working with the API in a meaningful way. And that's the first step that it looks like we need to do, taking a look at this documentation. We need to get ourselves an OAuth redirect URL, and we need to get ourselves a token. So what we'll do is we'll open up OAuth.io, and we will wait for the number of providers that it supports to load up. And let's see if we can just search for Twitch right quick. That is totally not working, but let's just fly through here. See if we can find it. Looking for Twitch with a T. That's right. Okay, so we got the Twitch default app here. And what we're going to try to do with OAuth is we're going to use this service to give us a OAuth token that we will be able to use for the purposes of this workshop. It looks like we need two things. We need a client ID and we need a secret. So we just created a new app. Let's see, we need to add the callback, which is going to be going to OAuth.io, because OAuth.io is going to be managing our authentication while we are testing this out. I'm going to say I'm not a robot, because I am not. And we need to say, oh, category ID. We are going to say that this is decidedly an other type of app. Other details, demo for MLH. All right, so we got MLH live demo. Let's manage this. Let's manage this little guy. And then we're going to grab this client ID, which OAuth.io is asking for. And then we are going to create a new secret. We're going to grab that secret. We're going to drop it on here. And we're going to assume that everybody's going to be well behaved for the duration of this workshop, and that also the MLH folks are going to blur this out in post. I would be very grateful. Next, we need to define our scope. So this is going to be what we're asking the Twitch user to give us access to for the first time. And what I think we're going to do here is just grab everything that is read access. So we want to be able to check channel subscription. We want to check, read the channel updates. We want to check channel subscriptions. We want the ability to read ignored users, read access to non-public user information, and user subscriptions. Let's just do the read ones. Save the changes. Let's give it a try. Okay, so it's bringing up my account. So you'll notice here that this is not going to my application. This is going to twitch.tv, and twitch.tv is giving our MLH live demo, indicating that it wants access to my account, Brooklyn Hacker, and indicates all the things that you would be giving access to. So let's go ahead and authorize that, and bingo bongo, we got ourselves an access token. Are folks having difficulty reading? Shogaldi, let's go ahead and make it bigger. Thank you for that update. How's that? Can everybody read that access token really, really big? Is that a little easier for you? Okay, better. Awesome, cool. All right, so we have ourselves an access token. So we've done the hardest part of working with an API, and that's just getting access. So now that we have a token that we can work with, in just a few minutes, let's take a look at this API and see what it can do. Again, I have not really worked with this API, so I'm not sure what it can do in its entirety, and that's part of the fun. Let's see what kind of endpoints that we got here. Okay, we got an endpoint here called Get Top Games. So this is a web API endpoint that will get the games sorted by the number of current viewers on Twitch, most popular first. So sounds like this gives us the most popular games right now, like what people are watching on Twitch, which sounds like a lot of fun. And the information that we have here is basically everything we need to get started. So we have a URL, which is going to be the endpoint for our web API that we want to reach, and then we have a few parameters that we can play around with here. Now, one thing I could do is just hop into Python, like fire up a web client like Request, which is my favorite web client for Python, and I could do a request for this endpoint and start going to town in a REPL, but that's not really a great time, right? Instead, since I've never used this thing before, I don't know what it's going to give me. I don't know what the format of the JSON is going to be. So instead, I'd like to introduce our second tool, and that second tool is called Postwoman. And this is basically a WYSIWYG or rather a graphical user interface web client that makes it really easy to work with APIs. Make this a little bigger. Does that look big enough for y'all? Can you see what's going on? Thank you for the affirmative head shake, Mike. That is huge. All right, so Postwoman, really awesome, free, and super fast product to play with APIs for the first time. So basically what we have in this interface is the ability to construct any HTTP request. And this, in combination with our reference documentation, will give us the ability to see what's going on with this API. So the first place that we're going to start is we're going to start with the endpoint. So it looks like if I want to get all the top games being played by the number of viewers on Twitch right now, I need to do a HTTP GET request to this URL. So I'm going to go to the request in Postwoman. I'm going to select GET. I'm going to drop that endpoint here. Now let's just do a naive test. Click send. Uh-oh. That's not good. We're unauthorized. We need our OAuth token. Fortunately, we got that OAuth token a little bit earlier. So we can go to the authentication section and select OAuth 2. We can drop that token that we got with OAuth.io. And let's see if that'll work. Bingo bongo. We got ourselves a whole bunch of JSON here. And this JSON looks like all the popular games. Looks like the most popular game right now is The Last of Us Part 2. That's not surprising. I really want to play that game. Just Chatting. That does not sound like a game to me, but that's rad. Escape from Tarkov. Has anybody played that? Swift, have you played that game?
Video games are not exactly my forte, I would say, but never heard of that one.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. And then Grand Theft Auto 5, because apparently we're still 15 years ago. That's cool. Right on. Okay, so just like that, without writing any code, and regardless of what programming language we use, we have the ability to manipulate this API, get some information. We can also copy that response. So if we want to work with it locally into a file, we can open up a JSON file. We can drop that in, copy and paste it, and we have a ton of JSON that we can work with if we so desire. I don't know why that keeps going on, but it's definitely not cool. All right, so let's see what else this API can do while we're playing around here. I don't really know anything about Twitch, but get clips. Let's get clips. This will give you clips from a broadcaster. I don't think we know any broadcasters. I think we know any moderators. Get users. We can get a user ID, or we can get a user login name. So we can find, let's just find someone that is killing it right now on Twitch. Let's find a user that is just, has a ton of viewers. Okay. XQCO cow. I know you guy that like lost a chess match in like 6 moves. But apparently it did not hurt his following on Twitch because he is killing it. All right, so we're going to use this guy's username, and we're going to grab this endpoint. So we got a user here. So let's use this endpoint. We're going to change our endpoint from the top games to what should be a top user, and then we can specify a parameter with this parameter section. And we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to add a new parameter, and the parameter that we're looking for, according to the documentation, is going to be login. So if we supply the login for this user, and if we set the value to this name that we see in Twitch, we should have ourselves the user. There we go. So here, we got a ton of information about this user. We're going to save this offline just in case we want to use it for the webhooks later, because we probably want to pick a busy user to get webhooks off of so that we get a continuous stream of information going on. Cool. So we used one endpoint. We used a second endpoint. Let's just do a third one to reinforce what's going on. Let's take a look at videos and just let's get videos from this particular user. Okay. So looks like in order to get videos, we need to use this endpoint. So we're going to go up to our request. We're going to change from getting information about users to getting information about videos. And I suspect we're going to have to give it a user ID. So let's grab that. And we're going to ditch the login parameter here. We're instead going to put in user ID as a parameter. And then we're going to grab that user parameter for the login, xcow, xqcow. We're going to drop it in here as the value. See what happens. Send. Here we go. Okay, looks like we got ourselves a video here. And looks like that video is fairly popular. 18,000, 28,000, 20,000, 22,000. Let's grab this video. So we got our URL here. We can drop it into the thing. And kablam! We got ourselves a video. Presumably, after this sweet advertisement is concluded, there will be a Switch player playing a video that he collected. Cool. So that is interfacing with an API that we basically don't know in a few minutes with a tool called Postwoman. How about we take a quick pause there and see if there are any questions about working with web APIs?
I actually have a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Somebody else have one?
Feel free, anybody, just to jump in really quick or turn on your camera as well.
All right, I got a question for you, Rob.
So, wait on me. Wait, hold on. Let me put on my serious face.
Okay, so
serious face.
Oh, there you go. I like that. Okay, so we showed how to use an OAuth API there, and it was pretty straightforward. It seems like the tool we're using is doing a lot of the actual configuration behind the scenes there. And we're doing this through like a tool that we found. So 2 questions. Are there other kinds of authentication that you think are really common that people should be knowing about here besides OAuth? And then 2 is, if we weren't going to use like a GUI kind of WYSIWYG interface that we have here, like what other, like let's say we wanted to use this in a library or some app we're writing, like what are the tools you're going to recommend for doing that kind of interfacing? Or maybe we'll see that later. I'm just curious.
Oh, no, those are both great questions. So really what we're getting at is, okay, once we've explored the API, how do we actually bring it into our code and see what's going on? So let's take the first question first. There are many different types of authentication that are out there. There are some APIs that you can access where they just give you a secret key and you just add that key as a parameter in your list here, or as an authentication piece, or even as a header, like we did with your client ID. There are a number of APIs where that totally works. Twilio's a good example of those. There are also different flavors of OAuth, some of which are more painful than others to use. This version of OAuth, OAuth 2, is still painful, but it's the least painful of the 3 that are available. So you're going to find many different types of authentication paradigms that are out there. And if I'm integrating this with my application for the first time, let's just take the example of a Python developer. I'm a Python developer. First thing I'm going to do is see if there is a library that exists for that particular service. For a Python user, I'm going to open up the cheese shop. This is PyPy. This is the Python package index. I'm going to take a search. I'm going to see, looks like there's a whole bunch of different Twitch libraries here. This one looks pretty good. Let's go to the home page. Looks like if we do a pip install Python Twitch, this will give us a library that we can use with our app. And if we open up example.py, we can, what do we have here? Trying to find some documentation here. Did not see any, which is not a great sign. Let's search for a different one. Twitch client, easy to use, Twitch client. See how easy. Ah, there we go. So I will instead use Python Twitch client. And now in my example application, I can just do import Twitch Helix, which is the, oh my goodness, every time I hit Control D, that pops up. That is a fail. Looks like I can create a new Twitch client by importing this Twitch Helix object. So I will do Twitch Helix. And then looks like it asks for my client ID. Which we can drop in from, just have it here in post one. Good Lord. I can't paste because the thing is jacked up, which is amazing. That is spectacular work, Rob. But anyway, you have a native client here that you can use in your native code. I'm sure there are a lot of JavaScript developers here. So if I was trying to do a Twitch integration, I would go to npm immediately. I would take a look, take a search for Twitch, and here you can see a whole bunch of options. Looks like this Twitch one is pretty popular. You can see for the weekly downloads. So if I was doing this for real inside an application as opposed to being in exploratory mode and seeing what is possible, I would select a library in my native language.
So let me ask you two brief follow-up questions here that I think might be really interesting conceptually. So the first one is, okay, so we've looked at these two package managers and we found that there are obviously a bunch of different libraries out there. Like in your experience, what are the things you're actually looking at when you're evaluating which one of these to use?
That's a good one. So I look at three things when I'm looking at an external dependency to integrate into my project for the first time. Let's take the example of this one first. The first one is anybody else using it, right? There are millions of packages out there. A lot of people duplicate effort by trying to release libraries for similar services. Like, am I using the one that the rest of the community is using? Taking a look at this, looks like we have 2,241 downloads. Pretty consistent clip over time. That looks great. Second thing is whether or not I can use it, right? And this is going to be dependent on your software license. And that's a really important consideration. You don't want to invest a lot of time developing software for code that you're ultimately not going to be able to ship. This one's using an MIT license. MIT license is chef's kiss, really easy to use. You can include it in your application. You can not be worried about it. Second one is pedigree, or third one is pedigree, and that's how many releases does this thing have. Version 4, that sounds like it's been around for a really long time. We can go to their GitHub and we can take a look at the history. So I'm seeing commits from a year ago, but I'm also seeing commits from a few days ago. When I take a look at these releases, 223 releases, that's a lot of releases. This is undergoing a lot of active development. It's used by a lot of people. It's been starred quite a few times. There are 15 contributors for it, so there's very little bust factor. Taking a look at this package, I'm feeling pretty good about. Let's compare that to the first Python package that we saw, that we just grabbed off this Python 1.3. This one I'm less stoked about, right? We're not seeing a ton of statistics here, so let's look at libraries. Source rank is 8. It's got a lot of dependencies, or a lot of people are using it in other apps. It's got 33 releases. The last release was 2016, though. That's not a good sign. So it may be this may be an application, or this may be a library that the developer has ultimately given up on. Also, it's tough to get to the GitHub version of this. Looks like we have decent code coverage. That's nice, but yeah, this is the bad news bears here. You see 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you don't want to be using a stale API. Basically, what this is telling me is that if Twitch has changed anything over the course of the past 4 years, and I would say that likelihood is extremely high, this library is probably not going to support any of those new changes, and that's going to be rough for continuing development over time. Great question.
All right, can I give you one more, and then I promise I'm done.
Holy Christ, Swift! You're monopolizing everyone's time.
I know. All right, so this is actually a better framing of the original question I asked you. So you mentioned there's multiple different types of authentication, right? We have our API key we can use. There's a few different types of OAuth, things like that. I think one of the things I never really understood when I was first getting started with APIs is why the people who are providing those APIs picked different mechanisms for that authentication. Like, why do these companies make me go through this whole rigmarole with OAuth and versus like, why couldn't they all just do the API key thing like Twilio? That seems like it's much easier for me as the developer.
You know, I think it comes down to the difference between authentication and authorization, right? So when you think about these security concepts, they are different, right? Authentication is when you are telling the service provider, I am this person and I want to have access to your service, right? When you're a tool like Twilio, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because you either have the ability to send text messages or you don't. You have the ability to make phone calls or you don't, right? When you are also asking for authorization to other users' information, that's when the authentication that's when the authorization bit joins with the authentication bit. So in this particular case with OAuth, we have two things that are going on. First thing that's going on is that the user is authenticating to Twitch. They are using their username and password as their knowledge factor to prove to Twitch, I am this user, I have access to this account. A second thing is happening, and that's the dialog that comes up that says authorize. That second thing is me as the application developer for this app that we've started creating together. I am asking for access to your stream information. I'm asking for access to your email address. I'm asking for access to all these other individual bits. And that authorization is also an action that you as the user are taking, and it's also an action that is controlled by the OAuth provider themselves, right? So in my experience, when you have a utility service, like a SendGrid or a Twilio or Mailgun or a lot of these other kind of utility-like developer tools, you're probably going to see something that's key-based where you just have a shared secret and it's a lot easier for you to integrate. However, as soon as you have anything that involves a user and that user requires that user needs to give you permission explicitly to access some kind of information that's on their account, that's when you're going to see something like OAuth or other types of what are referred to as three-legged authentication and authorization schemes. Does that make sense?
It does. I feel like all my questions are answered. Thanks, Rob.
Fantastic. Well, that's what we're here for. So we're coming up on 15 minutes left, and then we're going to take some time for your questions for the remainder of the hour. Why don't we go ahead and dive back in to the code and start taking a look at webhooks. So what we've been doing so far with Post One is we've been sending requests, right? We've been sending information to Twitch. Twitch has been giving us some information back. This is a push technology, right? Like we are polling this individual service for something and they're giving it something back. We're fetching this kind of information. Now, a thing that would be really cool is for Twitch to be able to send our application information in real time, right? So if you're watching Twitch and you see someone get a pop-up saying like a person is a new subscriber or a person has followed for the first time or a person has given you bits, I don't know what half of those things are. Apparently they're all good. And the way that your application can find out about those particular events is through their webhook interface. So let's start diving in there and taking a look at their webhooks. So webhooks are basically something happens to a particular user and Twitch sends information about that to your application. So what we're going to do is go take a look at some webhooks. So we got our guide here. We're going to be looking at an introduction. Webhooks enable your application to subscribe to events that happen on Twitch. When an event to which you are subscribed occurs, Twitch notifies you via an HTTP request. For example, you may want to know when a user has a new follower, a stream has changed state, or a whisper is sent. Those are all great things. When you submit a request to subscribe to an event, your request is asynchronously validated, and then they send you a challenge back. Cool. So looks like basically we need to use Postwoman to send a subscription request to this endpoint, and then we will be able to get some information back. So let's go ahead and dive in to to that. So we got a new endpoint that we need to do. And we also have a new method that we need to apply. So this time we're not requesting read information. We're not telling Twitch to give us something. We're instead giving Twitch data, and we're expecting them to do something with it. We're basically writing to their webhook API in the form of a subscription. So we're going to change our method from get, which is a read method with HTTP APIs, and instead select post, which is going to be a write method for HTTP APIs. And we're going to select this webhooks hub. So this is the endpoint that you use to say, I want to subscribe to a particular webhook. And here it looks like we got a bunch of required fields here in this documentation. And the first one is an important one, and that is going to be callback. So we'll go down in postwoman, and we will bring up our parameter list. We're going to get rid of the previous parameter that we had. We're going to add a new one. And this new one is going to be callback. And what they're looking for here is a URL to our web application that is going to be consuming these webhooks. So let's take a quick moment to build a little Python app that's going to be able to accept these webhooks. And then for this, we're going to be using a framework I'm familiar with called Flask, which is super easy to use. We're going to import the Flask library, and then we're going to create a new Flask app using the name of our script. Then we're going to set up a route for our webhook. We're going to ask that route to accept both GET requests and POST requests. Oh, nice. Flask is one of the projects folks are contributing to. Give my best to Armin. He's a great guy. All right, and in this case, we're just going to return a hello world. So we're basically saying with this app, if anybody goes to the root of our web app, the / address, we want to return the string hello world. And then we're going to set it up so we can run it on the command line. So if the name of our app is main, which is respective of being run from the command line, we're going to set our app debug to true because we're doing this live and anything bad could happen. And then we're going to run our application on port 5000. Save that puppy. Here we have Flask App open. We're going to run it with Python. And if we bring up our web browser, we should be able to look at port 5000 and see hello world. Excellent. All right, so we got an application we just built together, quick Flask app. If you go to the root of our app, which we would be doing on port 5000, you get back hello world. So this makes it, we have a scaffold here set up for us to receive requests coming in from an external web service. Now, we have a big problem here, and that big problem is that if I take my URL that I have here, which is localhost, which works on my machine, and I put it in the chat, and I ask anyone in the chat to click on that link, what's going to happen? Kenneth, what's going to happen? Kenneth, what's going to happen? Opara, pick up the slack.
As a reminder, you're all muted.
Everybody's muted. You have to unmute. You guys can go ahead and just unmute. I think we're going to be okay if you all unmute. Okay, you can't talk. That's all right. So, spoiler alert, you click on that and you're outside of my machine. It's not going to work because it is bound to localhost. This machine, blissfully, is not on the public internet. And so, if we're building an application on localhost and we want to receive webhooks, if I put in localhost as the callback, it is straight up not going to work, right? Because Twitch does not have access to my localhost because we are separated by the internet. What we need is some way to take this localhost URL and put it on the internet, and that is what we're going to use. Gautam, you nailed it, buddy. What's ngrok? What's ngrok all about? Can you unmute and talk about it?
Leah, as the host, you can send people a request to unmute as well.
ngrok does provide a secure shell. That is correct.
Yeah, it tunnels the traffic from somewhere to your computer.
That is correct. Did I get the pronunciation of your first name right, buddy? Did I butcher it?
Yeah, that's correct.
It is. I did get it. It's Gautam.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are you just not being nice?
No, it's correct.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, thank you. How'd you learn about ngrok?
From YouTube only, some videos.
Oh, that's great. So fun story. ngrok is made by a buddy of mine, Alan Shreve, who I used to work with at Twilio. Super nice guy. He's also probably the saltiest Go developer I've ever met. But you're correct. If you go to ngrok.com, this is a free tool that you can download, and you can expose a local port on your local host to the public internet and receive a secure URL that we can instead drop into Postwoman as our callback. So now what we're telling Twitch with the subscription is we want to receive webhooks. And every time you receive one of those webhooks, I would like Twitch to send them to this ngrok URL. This ngrok URL is going to send that request to our local host, and then our local host is going to execute the code that we wrote here at the beginning. Does that make sense? So we wrote a quick Python app. We have it running on our machine on local port 5000. And then we used ngrok to expose that port safely to the internet. And then we're going to ask Twitch every time that it has new data for a webhook, we're going to ask it to send it to that temporary URL that we received from ngrok. Let's see what else we got to drop into this. We need to make this hub. Oh, this may not be correct. All right, we need to be supplying this as JSON body, not as parameters. So we're going to get rid of that. And we are going to instead delete these guys, these folks. And let's add a few more. We're going to add our callback that we got from ngrok. And then what else do we have here? We have mode. So we need to tell Twitch that we want to subscribe. We have a third thing, which is a topic. This is going to be the URL for the topic to subscribe or unsubscribe from, and matches to a new Twitch endpoint. So let's get to a topic. And this topic is going to be something down here. And let's do user followers. And we're going to add a parameter here. And the parameter is going to be specifies the user who has a new follower. So that's going to be the toID, and we're going to select that super famous YouTuber that we had before. It's going to be the XQC, who's probably going to generate a lot of data for us. And then we got one left is least seconds. So how many seconds do we want the subscription to last? We don't have a lot of time left in our time together today, so we're just going to say seconds in an hour. We're going to subscribe for 3,600 seconds. All right, so to recap, we are asking Twitch programmatically to create a new webhook subscription for us. We're going to send it to our ngrok temporary URL we just set up. We're going to subscribe to all the new followers for a very popular Twitch user, and we are going to ask for that subscription to last for an hour. Does that all make sense? All right, let's click send, see what happens. Okay, we got an okay. So now is the magic. Now it's the magic time. Problem is, we don't know what went on because we're just returning a string. We don't know what was in that request. We have no idea what's going on. So let's open up our localhost port 4040, and we're going to see the real magic of ngrok. In addition to taking your local application and publishing it on the internet so that we can accept these webhooks. ngrok also has a really easy inspector that keeps track of everything that we've received and makes it possible for you to introspect it. So we got a GET request now about a minute ago, and it contained this bit, hub.challenge. So it looks like in order for us to confirm this subscription, we need to send them that challenge that we just received. And to subscribe to events. And I'm not sure how to send that let's do webhooks guide. Subscription verify if your request is per view. Twitch sends you a request to confirm that you requested the subscription. Respond to the request with the challenge code provided in the query parameters and a success code. Okay, so we did that, but we did not do it in the query parameters, which I'm not sure how we would need to do. But unfortunately, that does mean we are at the end of our time. But you can imagine if we create a correct response here, if we respond with the 200 and we add to that GET request on our server, this string, that will be the verification that Twitch needs in order to consume our subscription, and then we will be off to the races. Does that all make sense? Cool. All right, so that is a few tools that'll help you work with web APIs and webhooks. What we took a look at today was OAuth.io with the super small text. It's available at OAuth.io. We looked at Postwoman. That is the tool that we had for pushing web requests. That's available at postwoman.io. We took a look at ngrok, and that is available at ngrok.com. So the use of all three of those things together will make working with these kinds of tools and these kinds of APIs way simpler for you all to do. So with that, we got about 10 minutes left. Why don't we take some questions? I got a question for y'all. Was this useful? I think it was useful for Swift. He learned a lot today.
Yeah, we're getting more activity in the chat now too, it looks like.
Oh, good. Yes, awesome. Absolutely useful. That's great. That's great. Yeah, a lot of working with this kind of stuff, and I think what you're going to find on your journey as a developer is just finding tools that make yourself more productive. So if you find yourself banging it up against a wall, and I think this is general advice for programming as a whole, I would encourage you to look into the broader community, look at stuff like Stack Overflow, look at your package manager for your language of choice, and see if there is someone else that has been bothered by this problem so much that they've developed a really easy tool for you to use. And that will really help improve your development experience.
Someone in chat is asking about childsafe.ai.
Yeah, so ChildSafe AI is a startup that I started 3 years ago, and we focus on protecting kids online. So it's a little heavy, but we provide machine learning tools for combating human trafficking in the United States. Our customers are primarily law enforcement, and we give them tools to help folks that are trying to exploit children online. So super heavy stuff, but very rewarding. What is the difference between Postman and Postwoman? That is a great question. So Postman was an excellent tool that did basically the same thing, but there were two very significant changes that happened with Postman. One, they made a shift to Chrome native applications using their NACL, the salt Chrome bit, and two, they started charging for it. Postwoman came out, I want to say 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And the reason why I like it more is like it's all in a web browser. I think the interface is actually better. It has less bells and whistles, but it's cleaner and easier to use. And you don't have to sign up in order to use it for the first time. So all this stuff that you saw here was all cookie based. I am not logged in to Postwoman. So it's my absolute go-to for working with any web endpoint for the first time. Gottfried, you got your green screen up, looking good.
I do.
Oh yeah, your favorite bridge right there.
It's true.
That is true.
The best in the city.
That is true. That's kind of undeniably true. That is the best in the city. All right, folks. Well, if there are no other questions, if you would like to learn more about any of this stuff, or if you have any questions that you didn't feel like sharing with the rest of the group, you can find me on Twitter at DN0T. That's DN0T on Twitter, or you can just shoot me an email at rob@childsafety.ai. I'd be happy to help you any way I can.
Looks like there's one more question before we really quick.
Do push notifications use webhooks? I know they do for Android. I'm pretty sure they do for iOS, right? I think they do.
I don't know. I never actually thought about that. I have to assume it's a webhook, right? Because
I don't know.
I think it's a pub sub model, right? Where I don't know if it's necessarily exactly like a webhook, but my understanding is that it is like a subscriber model of some kind.
Yeah, looks like notification. Setting up a remote notification server. Set up a server to generate notifications and push them to user devices. Yeah, so this looks like it's a webhook model. But I don't know that because I haven't done it. So my deep inclination is that this is probably webhook. Now I will say that this interface is different from push notifications that are available in most modern browsers, and I don't know what those use. I imagine they probably use webhooks, but I don't know that for sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for taking time today to chat through all of this and giving some great tips and tricks for individuals. And this will actually be uploaded so you guys can revisit too if things went a little bit too quickly or you wanted to get a little bit more backtracking on information.
Oh, well, if we're going to upload this and we're going to finish it off, I need to have my boss background. Yes! My boss background to end this thing. I'm in the tunnel, the neon tunnel of the internet.
It's a really good background. You're in the tube.
It really is. You like that, right? It's kind of cool. I feel like I'm radiating awesomeness from my head, which we know is not happening, but it makes me feel that way.